Welcome back to another week of SoCal Business and Basketball Report. This week we're doing our second week here in Southeast Asia, so closing off our coverage here in Subic Bay, Philippines, where the SEA Games, the Southeast Asia Games, just completed. And we're going to talk a little bit about the professional basketball this week, as we talked about amateur basketball and businesses in the Philippines last week. And we're going to get into some of the different geography, neighborhoods, and the ties to Southern California with particular basketball players. Sedrick Barefield from Corona Centennial has Filipino ties, and there are others as well. So we're going to talk about the pathway to professional basketball for some of the young guys as well. Before we get into that, I just want to mention Subic Bay used to be a U.S. naval base here in the Philippines. We're in the northwestern corner of Luzon, the main island of the Philippines. Manila is south of us here on Luzon. And this naval base existed with the United States Navy from approximately 1900 to 1942, and then from 1945 to 1992 it was a U.S. naval base. So Philippines is a great area for history buffs, for military buffs to come and study as well. And Japan actually had control of the coast here, the base from 42 to 45. And prior to the 1900 point, this was a colony of Spain. And the famous hero of the Philippines, Rizal, where he is someone that everyone in the country looks up to. He did a lot of writings, was a doctor as well, and the freedom that came in the Philippines, many would point to Rizal. And there's different monuments in the United States, in Carson, California, in West Covina, California, in New Jersey. There's monuments at the Seafood City in Carson that many people have gone to, where you can get Filipino groceries. It's a nice statue there. The other thing that I think that people remember, Phil Jackson shined a light on it, referred to the Bataan Death March. And that's where there were U.S. and Filipino POWs that were marched a little over 60 miles, and it was very brutal. You can read a history on that. And prior to the 1900s, Spain had the Philippines as a colony, and there's a lot of terrible stories from that time frame as well, where they were out near the ocean. There were bars put into the rocks, and people were put into these areas behind the bars, and the high tide came in. There was nowhere people could run. So anyhow, the military history, the history of the Philippines is something that a lot of people have interest in. The San Miguel Company is a very large conglomerate, and they own multiple teams in the PBA here in the Philippines, the Filipino Basketball Association. And one of their teams, Ginebra, San Miguel, is in the finals this year. And we'll get into that, but I wanted to draw a light on some of the players that have done well here over the last year that are from the United States. KJ McDaniels led the league in scoring this year, 37.1 points per game. He played for TNT Catroba, and KJ was a Clemson basketball player. He was first team all ACC, to give you an analogy of his skill level. He was defensive player of the year his junior year, and he also led the ACC in blocks. And he went pro at that point. He was drafted, played for the Rockets and Nets, and when you watch him play, he doesn't just look to shoot. He looks to pass the ball, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him at some point in a NBA uniform again. Capri Alston from Chicago played at Midwestern State. Very high IQ, and he's only 6'4", 6'5". He led the league in rebounds at 18.2 a game, and a lot of rebounders that are excellent. They have a way of tracking the basketball from the shooter's hand and can see where it may go, that backside rebound. Dennis Rodman was really good at that. I remember years ago watching the top rebounder in Akron, Ohio. The kid actually had autism, and he was very focused and honed in. By the way, Kent State University has a big player, 6'10", who has autism this year. So that's the first case in Division I that I've seen with that. But anyhow, Capri Alston does not have autism, but he's a very good rebounder, very smart, high IQ player, and he's here in the Philippines. And Marcus Blakely, a 6'5" player, played at Vermont. He was the two-time America East Player of the Year. He led the league in steals at 3.5 steals a game. And, as I mentioned on the front end, some other people in the United States who know this may be a potential landing spot. Sedrick Barefield from Corona Centennial, who played at Utah. He's currently in the Oklahoma City Thunder organization. Who knows, he may get a shot this year. I think the Thunder only have 2 point guards on their NBA roster with Chris Paul and Schrader. They have some shooting guards, and Sedrick's a scoring point guard type of player. Did very well at Corona Centennial and at Utah. And by the way, his father is the head coach at Rancho Christian High School, who just beat Sierra Canyon. And so his dad's a real gentleman, and they have a very good ball club this year in Southern California. But Sedrick, he's going to pursue the NBA. He might have a shot. Remy Martin from Arizona State and Sierra Canyon High School in Los Angeles is also a guy that has some Filipino blood. And so this could be something. It's got to be for you. It's got to be something that you want to do, and it's not for everybody, but this could be a place that would be receptive to Remy. Other opportunities that can arise within basketball, sometimes very good players become naturalized citizens for international play for a country, and the Philippines is a good example. Andre Bloch, a 6'10" player, we're basically at the end of his era here in the Philippines, but he played for the Brooklyn Nets, and people that follow the NBA would be familiar with Andre. He was a veteran in the NBA. And you might have, if you're a big guy, you may have 10, 15 years where you can play professional basketball and make a career of it. Guards, it's a little different, sometimes less time for them. Most times less for them. But Andre, he decided to take the opportunity. And when I say the opportunity, you may be presented with a pension, or you may be offered other financial opportunities if you play for a country and you're naturalized. And so he did well. They beat Senegal, I think it was 81-79. When they beat them in World Cup action. So that was their first win in 40 years at that level. And usually the Philippines would also win the SEA Games, and they just won the SEA Games, the Southeast Asia Games. When they go on to play other teams in Asia, such as China, maybe Australia, that's when sometimes the Philippines has a harder time. But Andre was a very good player. Now, give you an alternative, a player from Kent State University, Jay Youngblood, he chose to take naturalization from Lebanon, and an opportunity was presented to him. It's a personal choice, of course. Some people would never do that, but Jay was presented the opportunity. He's only 6'4", so he's more of a athletic guard, great defense, and Lebanon's team is more of an up and down, run and gun type of team. The defense was very important to their coach at the time, and so they presented the offer to Jay Youngblood. He accepted, and you know, whether you're a guard or a big guy, sometimes the players look at it and say, hey, am I going to be able to retire at the end of their basketball career? And that's when those kind of decisions can be made. I mentioned the SEA Games and the countries that would be involved with that. And by the way, I put on social media under Raymond B. Dietz. You can see it in LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Picture that it was a little bit controversial up here in the Subic area. There was, and anytime you get into international athletics and facilities, I mean, all kinds of things start flying, but some of the athletic facilities were not completed in time for the SEA Games. And so it got a little controversial when you get involved with contractors. You can read a lot about that if you Google that. But the SEA Games, some of the teams that would be involved with that are Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Singapore. By the way, Singapore is a great place to visit, very clean. They have, you walk down the road, you might be coming up to a mall, and there's just a big concert that you would only see in the Forum or other places, large arenas, but they're just out in the open public. They're doing a lot of things to attract people. And the kaya toast, the coconut jam toast, is very good there in Singapore. Other places, Thailand, Timor-Leste, Vietnam, are teams that compete in those SEA Games, and the Philippines usually are very dominant in that. And also, by the way, Vietnam's a very good place to visit. Walking through traffic, the open air markets, Ho Chi Minh City, which is the old Saigon, that's a very good place to visit. And business is really picking up in Vietnam. A lot of people, if you go down to say Westminster in Orange County and talk to some of the older Vietnamese guys, they would never trust to open up a business in Vietnam based on their life history. They would tell you, well, after 5 years you run a business and the government's just going to sweep the rug out from under you. But you know, a lot of people are having success over there. I mentioned Jollibee last week. Jollibee, they own what's the #1 retail coffee company in Vietnam, Highlands, and I mentioned last week that they bought Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf from California. But coffee's actually an interesting thing. It's a big deal in Vietnam. They're the world leader in cheap coffee. When you go to Starbucks, the large chains, it's generally Arabica coffee that they use. The Robusta bean is a little cheaper. It has more caffeine, and that is big in Vietnam. And actually, a friend of the show, Perry Grant, his daughter, Sarah, Dr. Sarah Grant, she's one of the experts in the United States on Vietnamese coffee. And so the hotels in the United States, they use the Vietnamese coffee. A lot of the instant coffees, like your Sanka, they're going to use Vietnamese coffee. It's become a brand, and it's to the point where they'll even grow coffee in countries around Vietnam, ship it to Vietnam, and call it Vietnamese coffee. So anyhow, there's a lot of information about that out there, and Vietnam does compete in the SEA Games as well. As we were talking about the different countries and picking up international players, well, it kind of reminds me of soccer, and the #1 U.S. soccer player, Christian Pulisic, who was born in Hershey, Pennsylvania, he has an interesting story where as he was coming up, he eventually, as a youth prodigy, went to Dortmund, and he was the youngest player to score a goal for the United States in a U.S. World Cup qualifying game, and he came up. He had the opportunity to play for Croatia. He was eligible for that. Had the offer. He turned it down, and a short time after, Jurgen Klinsmann, who was a longtime Orange County resident, and at the time the coach of the United States, he gave him a spot on the actual World Cup roster for the United States. And a lot of people thought it was just to lock him up, because eventually Germany, or who knows who's going to try to scoop up Christian, because he was a up-and-coming player. And he actually put him in a game early in the World Cup at the end, and a lot of people thought, again, that was just for experience. But Christian caught a ball. It was a long pass, caught a ball in the air, turned on it, and put it in the goal. It had to be within 5 minutes of him going in the game, and it was just a remarkable goal. And so I don't, not only were they trying to get the kid experience, I think Jurgen thought it gave them a chance to get back in the game, and it did. But today, Christian is usually the best player on the field every game that he plays in, whether it's in Europe professionally or international play with the United States. And so once you select a team in soccer that you're going to play with, you're with that team forever for the rest of your life. So kind of a feeding frenzy in soccer, and you know, we could go that way with basketball eventually. So as I mentioned, in Subic Bay here, last week we were up in Dangolin, in the northeast corner of Luzon Island, in a nice peaceful beach there. There's more people in this area in Subic Bay. Even when it was a Navy base, people would use it for rest and relaxation. A lot of R&R going on here, and also there's private beaches today. But when it was a Navy yard, they would use it to repair ships, fuel up, and that type of thing. There are other places here now. There's a dinosaur island, there's a safari park. Just below here, Pangasinan, there's 100 islands where you can do some island hopping. That's a nice place. One visit I did that. That's a pretty good thing to see. And so you've got a good feel of the Philippines now. You got Manila south of here. This is Luzon Island, the big island. Up to the north, Aurora province in the northeast. Dangolin Beach, real peaceful. A lot of agriculture up there. Over here, Subic Bay in the northwest corner. And it gives people from Manila a place to go to, where they can drive to, and they don't have to get on a plane. Now, a lot of times when people want to go to those white sand beaches, last time I was here I went down to Palawan, beautiful beaches there in the kind of the center of the Philippines. And in Palawan, that's a place where the U.S. show Survivor was filmed, and they have signs there to show you that. Boracay is also a nice beach area in the center of the Philippines. And then to the far south, you've got Mindanao. And the town General Santos is where Manny Pacquiao is from, the great Filipino boxer. He has strong ties to Southern California, as in Hollywood, Wild Card Gym. Manny would train there at the gym, and was just friendly with everybody. And there was Freddie Roach, the trainer, he owned the little plaza there, and there was a little restaurant where you could get the spicy chicken wings that Manny loved. So in that region down where Manny's from, in Mindanao, that's mostly Muslim. The rest of the country is mostly Catholic. When you look at Rizal, you know, sometimes people would say, and he kind of said that, hey, I wasn't the one that told these people what to do. It was his writings that people took, and he basically approved of it so that they would go and free themselves. And there's a discussion when you look at it with Rizal about free thought as compared to Catholicism. So that's something to look into if you're entertained by that. So the PBA finals, the pro basketball finals, is this week here, okay? And the Meralco Bolts, just to give you a feel for the skill level, the talent level, Meralco Bolts, they have a guy, Chris Newsom, who's born in San Jose, California, played at New Mexico Highlands in the United States, and then at Ateneo for college. And then Ginebra San Miguel, who I think is the favorite. Japeth Aguilar that I mentioned last week that played at Western Kentucky and also at Ateneo. He's on that team. And then Justin Brownlee from played at St. John's University in the United States. He is on San Miguel. So the Philippines can be a land of opportunity for people for basketball or business. And it's got to be for you. The one thing I'd mention, if you come to the Philippines, you're going to want to make sure you have some good drinking water. And here's the you can see the Wilkins bottle with the big W. It's a Coca-Cola product. It's never given me a problem. I always get cases of that stuff and have it prepared for different places that I go. And you want to make sure you have, there's other good products as well, but you want to make sure you have good bottled drinking water in the different areas that you go to. And that's going to pretty much do it here for our last half coverage in Southeast Asia. We covered the SEA Games, we talked about professional basketball last week, we talked about amateur basketball, and there's a lot more people in the United States with Filipino ties and Filipino blood than people realize. And this could be a good opportunity to continue a basketball career. And Southeast Asia is a growing area. I remember when there were 80 million people in the Philippines, it just keeps, 100, 120, 140, you just keep growing as a country. And so I appreciate you joining us. We'll be back in the States next week and look forward to bringing you more SoCal Business and Basketball Report. Have a great weekend.